Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and where we get Dungeons and Dragons. So I did a previous video that taught there are six places that Dungeons and Dragons itself, Wizards of the Coast itself, calls out for how to get Dungeons and Dragons now. So I did a whole video on the first five. There's two VTSs, that's Fantasy Grounds and Roll20. There's Amazon. There's your local store. There's D&D Beyond, and there was one more that I didn't put into that last video that I can talk about here. I could spend this entire video talking about it because it really is quite special. And the last one is Barnes & Nobles, right? Now, first of all, why is it now Barnes & Nobles is where you can get the physical copy of Dungeons & Dragons. This is a really big deal. Like the physical copy of Dungeons & Dragons, it's a really big deal that it exists. And I will tell you right now, when there are no physical copies of Dungeons and Dragons coming out, we can have the conversation of if Dungeons and Dragons even exists then. Because I think, and I'll tell you my answer right now, I don't think it will. If we ever reach a point where Dungeons and Dragons is not printed, Dungeons and Dragons is finished. And the reason why is if it's just digital, it's just a video game, right? And there is really nothing special about any video game on this planet except Fortnite. Fortnite has a special place. It does specific training that I think is incredibly valuable. But generally, the vast majority of video games are quite forgettable and unimportant, right? And one of the things, too, is also at the macro level, this is just my humble opinion, video games do more damage than good, right? And Dungeons and Dragons, that's not the case. If you look at society and you say, hey, has video games done more damage to society or more good for society? Without question, I think video games have done more damage to society, right? It's just my humble opinion. So it's real. So the physical product is incredibly important. Let's talk about Barnes and Noble. So Barnes and Nobles in America, this is all American specific, is the last existing bookstore chain in America. That's at scale. There might be a few, locals that have 3 or 4 up or down the east or west coast, but Barnes and Nobles is all over the country, and they are the last surviving chain bookstore. We used to have lots. You know what? BAM is still around. Books A Million, right? BAM is around, but they're mostly in malls. And malls are dying. There you go, right? So the reality is Barnes and Noble still has major bookstores all over the country, and I think that's why they're listed by Wizards of the Coast, and BAM isn't, or any other chain isn't, right? And Barnes and Nobles is incredibly important, and I owe Barnes and Nobles a huge thank you. So one, I love Dungeons and Dragons, and I particularly love the current version, 5th edition. And for years now, since 2014, I've gone into Barnes & Nobles, and I've sat down, and I bought a coffee, and I took over 2 or even 3 of the books I didn't own, and I just paged through them, and I had a really good idea what was in those books. I couldn't read them cover to cover in Barnes & Nobles, but I could spend 2 hours drinking coffee and getting a blueberry muffin, and I made sure that I was rewarding them for my perusing through their books, and they encourage this from their customers. And it's a big deal, right? I make a good nut, right? I make a little bit of money, and even I still don't have the money to just pull the trigger and buy every single 5e product, and that's now impossible. It's hard to even buy all the books, right? I'm working my way through the books. Now they routinely have $800 miniatures products. So there's no one on the planet who isn't a millionaire who can, and I'm not a millionaire, who can afford all canon D&D products. You can't. You literally need to be a millionaire to do it, right? Because the amount of spend would just not fit in anybody else's budget. But Barnes & Nobles has been incredibly helpful, and just allowing people who don't have the money to buy everything that's in D&D to get an idea, a scope of what's in Dungeons & Dragons. And they have really served the Dungeons & Dragons community, and they have really served Wizards of the Coast. And get this, Amazon doesn't do it. Amazon doesn't let you just peruse through the books at your leisure, the entirety of the book, spending as much time taking notes on a notepad next to the book. Amazon won't let you, right? And so Barnes & Noble is a really special source for the physical copies of Dungeons & Dragons. We're incredibly blessed that Barnes and Nobles is still out there doing the hard work of actually carrying physical books and making and keeping those books clean and safe so that we can walk in at any time and purchase from no less than a dozen, 2 dozen different. Most Barnes and Nobles will not have every 5e book in stock. They will have half, right? Sometimes if they're really well stocked, they might have as much as 3/4. All right, and it's important. It's really, really just incredibly important that they continue to do that work, and I'm incredibly thankful to them. And I think it's important that we acknowledge Wizards of the Coast is pointing to 6 places now where you can get D&D. They're saying D&D Beyond. They're saying 2 VTSs, Fantasy Ground and Roll20. They're saying Amazon. Amazon is important, right? They're saying your local shop, and they're saying specifically Barnes and Nobles. And those are the 6 places that Wizards of the Coast calls out. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What's been your experience, Dungeons & Dragons experience with Barnes & Noble? Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.